Hope you're all well. How is everyone? Okay, we're all okay here in the UK. I hope you are enjoying reading and literature. Here is the session for today, literature, my session 5. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And today's session is all about what is reading and how can we teach it. So it's about literature, so understanding about literature, reading, and about how we can teach it as well. Okay. You had some questions last week to think about at the end of the session. I asked you to think about how we read and how to teach reading. Did you think about them all? I want you first to discuss in pairs for 5 minutes what you thought, what you think about reading. What is it and how can we teach it? In pairs, pause the video, 5 minutes now. Okay. Okay, do you all agree? Let's have a look. Let's see if we all agree together. I hope you're all reading a lot. I suggested 2 hours a week of reading last week. I don't know if you can do that. What did you read over the last week? We read lots of different things, newspapers, WhatsApps, Facebook posts, academic literature, teaching material, and it's all, of course, very valid. Let's move on to today's lesson. So we're going to look at reading and teaching reading. When we're teaching English, there are 2 main types of lessons: language lessons and skills development lessons. In the language lessons, we're teaching new language for students to use. In the skills development lessons, we're getting learners to practice and develop their skills in using that language. And these can be completely separate lessons. What do you think the letters at the bottom under the question marks stand for? So for language, G, P, V, D, F, and for skills, R, E, P, R. You can pause now and discuss what you think they mean. Okay, have you got them? Let's see. So we can have various types of language lessons: a grammar lesson, a vocabulary lesson, we often call that lexis, a phonology lesson or part of a lesson, pronunciation, a discourse lesson, and discourse is language joined together coherently. So it's a big chunk of language, like an article or a speech or a discussion. It can be spoken or written. So it's looking at language in context. Or it could be looking at different functional language. But we're not looking at those language lessons today. Of course, we can have parts of lessons related to that. But today we're looking at the skills. We're looking at reading skill. So under skills development lessons, we can have 2 types. We have the receptive skills and the productive skills. What are the 2 receptive skills? Yes, of course, they are reading and listening, and the productive skills are speaking and writing. They used to call them passive skills and active skills, but that's not true, is it? Because when you're reading or listening, you're not passive. You are receiving the knowledge, but your brain is actually very active, understanding and working hard to understand and link all the different points. Okay. So we read in many different ways in life, don't we? We read these things differently. I want you to discuss now in pairs how you read this list of 5 things. Do you read in the same way? Do you read differently? Tell your partner how you read. 5 minutes, pause the video now. Okay, do you agree? I think I read all of these very differently. A newspaper, I look through to find out what is interesting, and then maybe I scan through to find the names, or I skim through to find the gist of the articles to find out what's going on. If there's anything I really want to read in detail, I'll read the whole article, but I don't read many. I read very quickly when I look at the newspaper. Facebook, again, I scan through quickly to see if anybody mentions anything interesting. Most of it is rubbish anyway, and a lot of it is fake news. We have to be aware of that. The bill I need to pay, I read this in detail. Why? Because it's important, it's money, we've got to check it very carefully. So I read that in detail. Teaching books, I often flick through. So have a look at the front, at the back, have a look through. I'll never read from front to back, but just dip into different parts. And I read a lot of novels, especially at night when I can't sleep. And I always read the novel from start to finish. Sometimes I skim over long descriptions or bits that are not too interesting, but I'll read all the words mostly in the whole novel. Are you the same as me? Do you read aloud any of these things? Probably not. If you're on Facebook and you want to tell your friend about something, maybe you'll read a few words, but we almost never read aloud these things in real life. Okay, loud versus silent in disadvantages of each one. And I'll give you 5 minutes or more if you need it. What are the good and bad things about each in the English language classroom? Okay, pause now. Okay, do you agree with everyone? Does everyone agree? Let's see. I've got some true or false statements here. 8 statements. Work through them with a partner and see if you think each one is true or false. Okay, pause the screen now for 5 minutes or so. Go. Okay, what do you think? It's a very complicated thing because there are so many different issues involved. Let's have a look and see what I think. Right, so number one, I agree that reading aloud is useful when you're learning how to read. So this is for children and adults who are learning literacy later on in life. When you're learning to link the letters and the sounds, it's really, really good to read aloud. So in primary school, age 5, 6, 7, maybe even after that, or children reading aloud to parents, sounding out the words, really useful. Number 2, definitely false. It's not too difficult. In fact, reading silently is far easier than reading aloud if you're trained to do it properly. Number 3, many people think reading aloud is the same as speaking and practicing pronunciation, but it's not. When you're speaking, you speak very differently from when you're reading out words. Very different skill, uses different part of the brain, and you speak in a different way. Pronunciation is very difficult to practice when you're reading aloud because you need to think about the meaning of the reading. So you're not thinking of the words, or if you're thinking of the pronunciation, you're not thinking of the meaning and you're not reading aloud very well. So it doesn't help. Number 4, of course, this is true. Reading silently is much, much quicker. So we can read a lot more and we can get our students to read a lot more if they read silently in class. Number 5, many teachers think that If you're reading aloud, you're involving the whole class, but you're probably not. If it's one person reading aloud, then the others are doing nothing. If everyone is reading aloud together, that's a very, very false way of reading, because people will not be understanding. They'll just be chanting mindlessly with the rest of the group. Much better to set a reading task to get them to read silently. Number 6. I think that's true, because in real life, we read silently much more. 7. Does this help? Maybe if you're going to be a newsreader in the future, maybe if your job involves reading aloud to other people, maybe a storyteller or a primary school teacher who's reading stories to children, maybe that's true. But for most people, it doesn't help in real life. And number 8, yes, this has been proved that when you read silently, you can understand a lot more than when you read aloud. Okay, so here is a summary sheet. Have a look through. Pause for a minute to read this and see if you agree with everything. Okay. Many teachers think that if you read it aloud, it means you understand it, but that's not true. Silent reading is great for reading at their own speed and going back and looking at something you didn't quite understand. Do you agree now that reading silently in class is better use of time than reading aloud? Okay, so if you don't agree, you can Google reading aloud in English classes. I Googled it and found several different interesting articles. And I think most people agree that these are the summaries, and reading aloud can be useful for some different purposes, but it shouldn't be the default option in class. Try Googling later and see what you come up with to read about the topic. Okay, we're going to do some reading now. Can you see this text? Okay, is it happy or sad? Probably from the title, Death on the Prom. It looks maybe a sad story. Now, can you read it? Can you pause the screen and see if you can read this story? Pause now. Okay, did you manage to read anything? This is made up symbols, and symbols are the only thing that are what letters are. Letters are symbols, aren't they? So this is how we construct meaning, by understanding the symbols. Now, if you notice, several of the symbols are repeated, and the story, I'll read it to you now. See if you agree. One night at about 10:30, a boy and a girl went out onto the sand. The boy and the girl went hand in hand in the moonlight. At the bandstand, the boy and girl went right out into the water. At first light, a couple were found dead on the sand. Horrible story. Can you see how those symbols make use of, reflect the story and help you construct the story? And when we're reading and trying to understand it, we use all of our knowledge of the world, knowledge of language, predictive ability to think ahead, make sense of things. And we're looking at patterns as well to see what means what. This is an example of top-down reading strategies and bottom-up reading strategies. Just looking at the symbols, we probably wouldn't understand it. We need to use our brain and everything we know and predict and think top down to use those strategies and understand what the story means. Okay, I'm going to show you another text now. I want you to tell me what this text is about. It's a newspaper article. What's it about? Here's the article. Yes, of course, you know it's about Donald Trump because you've got the picture and you know that this is the headline, the title, and this is the article. Do you know what language it is? This is in Burmese from Myanmar. Can you find the word Trump? Probably not. It's these three symbols here, and it's a totally unknown language. Even with a totally unknown language, we can predict and guess what we think it's about. We won't read any more of that. Okay, we're going to do 2 reading lessons now to demonstrate the stages of a good reading lesson. We're going to do a bad lesson first, and then a better lesson. Are you ready? Okay, so imagine that you are the students and we're going to do a reading lesson now. Okay, here is the text. Can you read it through? I'm sorry, I didn't find any pictures to go with it. It's a very interesting text. Can you read it? Just read it as quickly as you can. Find out what it's about. Okay, everyone finished? Okay, so tell me, what is the text about? I'm sure you can't answer. It's too difficult, isn't it? Now, all I did was I gave you the text and I talked about it a bit, and I didn't structure your stages to help you to do different things. As you can see, this is in phonemic script to make it a bit more difficult than just being in English for you. I'm sure you can understand a lot of this phonemic script, but I didn't make it easy for you. I made it more difficult for you by just giving the text and asking you to work through it. So, what was wrong with that lesson? Can you make a list of all the things that were wrong? The first one, I've said already, there were no reading tasks to guide the understanding of the students. Can you, in pairs now, pause the video and make a list of everything else that was wrong with the lesson? Okay, pause now. Okay, how many criticisms do you have of the lesson? It was very difficult, and it was the teacher's fault that the lesson was so difficult. Let me show you. First, there were no tasks, no reason for reading. Then there was no help with language, no vocabulary, no grammar, no support. I didn't generate any interest to get you motivated to read or interested in the context. I asked the question afterwards when you couldn't even look at the text anymore. I didn't put you under pressure because I'm not there. I didn't give a time limit, so you didn't know how you're expected to read. No follow-up. No language work. And I was actually talking while I was expecting you to be reading. Not very helpful. Okay, so what solutions can we have for these problems? Pairs, can you talk about how you could do that lesson in a better way? Pause the screen now and discuss. Okay. Here, okay, so here we're going to do another lesson. Let's see if you predicted this differently. Okay, so this is lesson 2. I'm going to give you 10 seconds of silence to read this and find out one question. Is it about a holiday, food, or an animal? 10 seconds, skim through now. Okay, stop. What was it about? Yes, it was an animal. Yeah. How do you know it was an animal? Did you see the word penguin? Okay, that is a type of animal. Yeah, so you don't need to read through the whole thing, first of all, just a little bit to find the answer. Okay, now the second task. This time you can read it in more detail. And the question is it funny or not? Why and why not? And this time, if you want to, you can work in pairs and help each other read the story to each other. Okay, pause the screen and read it. Okay. Do you think it's funny? Did you laugh? This is very English humor where there's a play on words, because the park guard said, "Didn't I tell you to take the penguin to the zoo?" And the man said, "I did. And he liked it very much. So now I'm taking him to the cinema." So it's two meanings, double meaning of take it to the zoo as a weekend pleasurable activity, or take it to the zoo to put it there. Okay. Third task. What's the nationality of the person who wrote this? Okay, pause the screen for 2 or 3 minutes. See if you can work it out. This time you need to read for great detail. Okay. Did you find any clues? The clue is in the way the word for penguin is written. Now this says penguin, whereas I say penguin. So this tells us that the person who wrote it was from Australia or New Zealand, because that's the pronunciation. Isn't phonemic script amazing? The way we can see the regional variety of English that somebody speaks. Okay, so then after that, we can tell different jokes to each other. The teacher can tell a few jokes, the students can tell jokes, okay? And then that's the end of that lesson. Was that a better lesson than the first one? I think it was. You've got all the problems here that we had with the first lesson. How did we work with them in the penguin lesson to help everybody understand? Because phonemic script is not difficult to read, is it? It's much more difficult if the teacher makes it difficult by not structuring the lesson well enough. Okay, think about in pairs what we did in the penguin lesson and if it helped with these problems. 2 or 3 minutes, pause the video. Okay, let's see if we agree. With the penguin story, I set the task before you started reading. That's very helpful to show you why and how you should read. I didn't help you with language, but I could have pre-taught some vocabulary if I thought you knew it, didn't know it, or some script. I didn't do any interest generation, but we could have done a pre-reading discussion about activities or about animals or a task. We had a staged lesson where I set a gist task. What's it about? then they read, then a detailed reading task, and then they read. So it's a staged approach. If I was there with you, I would get the students, teachers, to compare your ideas in pairs first before whole class feedback. And I gave clear time limits. The time limit tells you how long you have and how carefully you need to read. We can follow up with some speaking or writing work afterwards. And we can integrate language focus, like looking at the phonemic script for the word penguin. And the teacher has a much lower profile in that sort of lesson. Okay, so we'll look at the different stages, how we can stage the lesson, reading lessons, to help learners understand. Here are some stages. Which order do you think is best? Pairs? Put the list in order. Which one do you think should be first? Okay, I think I'll give you a clue. Which one's first? Yeah, B, prediction. Prediction is first, is when you predict what you think is going to be in the text from the headline, maybe from a picture, from a discussion. 3 or 4 minutes to order the list in pairs now. Okay. Let's see if you agree. Let's see if you agree with me. Okay, here are the stages in the right order. So prediction first, then you can have a scan read. Scanning, when you're just looking through quickly to find things that jump out at you. That could be after stage 3, gist reading or skim for gist, when you're looking through the whole text. Only then do you read for detailed understanding. And after all of that, you will have the brain space to focus on the new language in the text. And finally, it's a good idea to use the language and the ideas productively in a speaking or writing task. Can you now match the stages of a reading lesson with the description or examples? So you're matching the numbers with the letters. Let's try one together. Number 1, which letter do you think? Yes. Number 1 is F, 1F. Can you match the others? I'll give you 5 minutes. Pause the video. Okay. Let's see if I have the answers. No. Okay, so 1 is F. Which one is scan reading? Scan is D, so it's like a radar screen. You scan for names with capital letters or numbers that jump out at you from the text. 3, gist skim reading is E. So that's when you move your eyes quickly just to get a general understanding of the text. Number 4 is B. So you're reading in a lot more detail to understand it all. 5 is C. You can focus on the tenses or the vocabulary or find a word that means something. And number 6 is A, speaking or writing afterwards. So all the information goes in, you process it, and then you produce in speaking or writing afterwards. So here is the general process of helping learners with literature or reading in class. We need pre-reading, something beforehand to predict or pre-teach. Then we need the overview of the text. That's a very, very quick stage. Just reading, skimming, or scanning. Then you can read for detail, silently, focusing on the meaning of the details, and then on language maybe, and then a post task with a productive skill. Okay? Can you do this in your lessons for teaching reading lessons? Your homework this week is to find some reading lessons to do with your class or your classes. Look at the ELTA-GB website again under resources and links. I will post the link in the group, or you can find it and post it yourselves. Find some reading lessons that are interesting for your class and look at the stages to see how you can stage the lessons to help learners understand and read better. Please try out some of the reading lessons if you can and tell the others how they work. So think about these stages from these materials. Okay, have a great week. See you soon.